Rightio. Look, thanks very much for that, Amber, and thanks everybody for coming along this evening. This morning I was in Waikato talking to a bunch of about 200 plumbers down there and basically giving a very lovely outlook for themselves, saying you're all going to be very busy over the next few years, not enough houses exist in New Zealand, there's going to be very strong construction growth, and your bigger problem is going to be how do you find staff. So I had sort of a mixed message for themselves there. And I suppose for yourselves this evening, my message is also a mixed one, in that sitting here, if you haven't already made a purchase, you want me to say it was a bubble, the surging Auckland house prices, and they're now about to fall by 10, 20, 30%, and so just hold off and then make a purchase and everything's going to be sweet. Well, let me just say that anybody over the past sort of 3 decades that I've been in this business analysing the New Zealand economy who has predicted a significant fall in New Zealand house prices, and especially the past 8 or 9 years, has been completely 100% wrong. And all those economists who were given the advice from 2009 in particular of, oh, it's a bubble, just wait, things are going to get cheaper, and encouraged you to hold off, well, they gave you bad advice, because now we have this massive queue of people who put off buying, maybe in 07 and 08, high interest rates, recession, didn't buy from 09 through to 2012 because they were getting these stories of, yeah, prices are still going to fall, they're still going to fall, keep waiting, keep waiting. Now, on top of yourselves, there's this extra queue of people trying to do some catch-up buying. And what I've tried to emphasise to people over the past few years is that there are some, I guess, a very long list of reasons why house prices are rising. Now, one, I'm going to give you some Googling references here. One of them is Tony Alexander, 19 Reasons. And that'll take you to one of the many articles I wrote, I think in 2011 or 2012, as to why Auckland house prices in particular would keep on rising. So this isn't me sort of making up a story at the moment to try and make it sound like I was on the right track. There's actually proof of it back there. And there's some really long-term stuff in here as to why housing is now permanently more expensive than it was before. One is that we have females who have entered the workforce from the 1970s, the 1980s. Prior to that, if there was somebody at an auction bidding for a house for their family, they were paying a price on the basis of one wage coming into the household. Now there are invariably 2 wages / salaries coming into the household. Naturally, that gets factored into house prices. Back in the early days there, 1970s, before that, the average size of a new house being built was around about 120 square metres. Now it's something like 190, 200. These days, the toilets are on the inside, and maybe there's more than one toilet. There's actually something in the walls, called insulation that didn't exist in the 40s, the 50s, sort of 60s houses. The houses have to meet standards for insulation, energy efficiency, earthquake preparedness. The materials are tested. Developers are paying fees. There's consenting levies, all these sorts of things to pay that say the house that's being built these days is completely different from the house that was being built in the past. There's also extra people out there buying property now. We've seen from about 25 years ago in New Zealand, the government and many agencies issuing warnings about the sustainability of superannuation and that people needed to start preparing for their retirement. And when these messages first started coming out in the late 80s, 90s, the memory fresh in the minds of all of us was the 1987 share market crash. Yes, I want to prepare for my retirement, but I don't think I'm going to do it through shares. Now, if you had, you'd be quids in. The markets have risen tremendously, over a long period of time. People naturally started gravitating towards housing investment. Up to the 1980s, if somebody was investing in housing, usually that was all they did. They had 20, 30, 40 of them, and that was their thing. We didn't get so many individual investors. Now, of course, we have many average Kiwis thinking, this is a perfectly normal thing to do. I'm going to become a property investor. On top of that, housing markets around the world have become internationalised. Around the world, there are people from other countries that buy properties in their market. And up until, the 2000s, we really didn't talk about either Indian buyers, Australian buyers, UK, Chinese or whatever, coming in and buying houses. Now we have these extra cohorts of people out there adding to the housing demand. We've also had a structural decline in interest rates. The big one was in the early 1990s. Now we've just had another one over the past few years. We've had inflation settle at lower levels, interest rates falling back to the lowest levels now since the 1960s. And this is where it gets exceedingly ironic that for somebody like me, my first house purchase was in September 1987. And if you remember your history, that was 1 month before the share market crash, so not so good on the timing. I paid 18.5%. I was better off than you at the moment looking to make a purchase and maybe paying 4.49%, 2-year fixed BNZ, I think is the rate we've got at the moment. I was better off back then. But when I was thinking about this, as I was getting my notes together for this talk a few days ago, I thought the nature of sacrifice. Back then, my sacrifice in terms of what I was spending on, cutting back on spending things, it happened after I'd made the purchase. I only needed a 10% deposit, and I did that by getting 4 credit cards, running them up to their limit, and going along to my bank saying, here, I've got a deposit, sure, let me buy a house. My sacrifice was sleeping on a disused sort of couch there, this old couch for 6 months afterwards, cutting back on major spending, because with an 18.5% interest rate, any bit you get off the principal, it's a big bonus, basically, so that's when I've made my sacrifice. Your sacrifice is shifted in time, because now you do need to get yourself a deposit, 10, 15, 20%. And of course, the price is so much higher. So while sure, repay your principal once you've got your house, etc. But for you, the challenge is sacrificing before you've even made the purchase. And here's where it gets really, really interesting. Because back in my day, sacrificing meant don't go down to the pub so often, don't take up smoking, don't go and waste it all on the horsies or some sort of nefarious habits out there, and that was the sacrifice. These days, the things you have to sacrifice or can sacrifice mean you're sort of stepping aside from what's considered to be a normal person in the modern environment. You see, people like me, we judge what we think you should be sacrificing on the basis of what I did not have in 1987. I didn't have broadband. I didn't have Sky TV or Netflix to be paying for. I wasn't spending, as I calculated 3 years, I was spending $6,000 a year going to cafes. I've stopped that now, not so good for my local cafe, but too bad. Eating out, we did that maybe 2 or 3 times a year, birthday, anniversary, something like that. Whereas we humans on the planet, we eat out all the time now. And of course, drinking basically meant you went down to the Bush Inn at Riccarton Road there, and Canterbury University, some big booze barn basically. Now you've got this great range of beautiful bars out there to partake of, and your beer is $10 or $15 a pop. I mean, I just laugh. I just think, why don't you go to the supermarket, pick up half a dozen or so? But that's not the new normal. The extent to which you have to make a sacrifice these days, it's been glibly put as, avoiding the smashed avocado. I don't really know what that is. Avocado has no taste for me. It varies from people, so I've never purchased it. But you have to sacrifice more, and you now have to do it before the purchase. That's where getting into KiwiSaver is a very good idea, and increasingly that's what people are looking to make their first purchase. Now, I've run through a bit of a list there, like I say, of some of the long-term factors contributing to the house prices being permanently higher. Let me throw in 2 relatively important ones of relevance here, especially in Auckland. One of them is migration flows. Up until the 2000s, we talked about brain drain from New Zealand. Will the last one out turn off the light? We fully expected that our kids would go overseas. If they weren't going to be a vet, a farmer, or work in a grocery shop or something, then they should go overseas, quite frankly. And in the 10 years leading up to 1977 to 86, on average, each year, New Zealand lost 17,000 people through migration flows, 17,000 net. In the 10 years to 1996, we gained 3,000 per annum. In the 10 years to 2006, we gained 11,000 on average per annum. In the past 10 years, we've gained on average 28,000 per annum. New Zealand now holds on to its young people, and that's what Auckland does. Auckland is what we call New Zealand's agglomeration. In this age of technology that we are in, where most of us can work remotely, you can't work remotely, because the speed at which the business environment is changing means you need to be interacting with other people very, very frequently, very, very quickly, people from a massive range of diversified backgrounds. They know that's technology, that technology. You develop ideas quickly, put them in the market, watch them fail, get the big data analysis, etc., redo them, put them out again. You can't do that if you've got staff members in Ekatahuna, Riverton, Edgecombe, all over the show. The world is not so much urbanising from paddy fields into cities, it's agglomerising. Whatever big city you're in, you're going to the next bigger one. And that means growth in London, it means growth in New York, San Francisco. And for New Zealand, that is what Auckland does. It is our big neural network agglomeration. And with reference to the migration thing, about a net 60% of the migrant flow, 60% of the net migrant flow goes to Auckland. Migrants go where migrants have gone. Migrants go where the jobs are. And I extrapolate that to the future, and it says to me, in an environment where there is a continuing, and I'd suggest worsening, shortage of builders, because young people want to go into technology sector and not have a job where you risk smashing your thumb or getting electrocuted or sawing your arm off or this sort of thing. This was the feedback from the plumbers, this morning. They can't get staff. The shortage of housing which exists in Auckland, it will get worse. Whatever number you've had in your head 1 year ago, 5 years ago, it is bigger now. It will be bigger in 5 years' time. And that says to me the prices will continue to rise. And if you were to ask me now, the question people have been asking me since, I'll claim the middle of 09, I won't claim 08 or 09, since the middle of 09, anybody asking me, I hear these forecasts of there's a major depression, recession coming along. We're going to be hit by foot and mouth or an asteroid, or we're going to get nuked or something like that. Do you think I should buy a house now or should I wait? And my response every single time since mid-09 has been, I see no incentive to wait. I would look to buy now. And that remains my comment at the moment. Now, we were asked, us speakers, if possible, to contribute maybe something from personal experience in terms of thinking outside the box. My example is, I guess, what I did 2.5 years ago. I started spending a lot more time up in Auckland and decided I don't want to be living out of hotel rooms, and maybe I don't have the budget for it anyway. Initially, I bought in Eden Crescent a 27 square metre bedsit. Being a bit of a tradesperson there, I got my saw, I bought tools. It was great to buy a whole new supply of tools. I cut the double bed in half, stuck it back together and made it into a single bed, demolished a wardrobe, made an internal wall. I had great fun. And after 4 months, I'd sort of done everything you can just about do of polite nature with other people around in a 27 square metre area. So I started looking for something more. And I kept coming across this particular property advertised, I think it was on the Trade Me website, and going, God, she is so beautiful, I'd love to buy it. It's female for your guide, is what I've gender notified it, sort of. And I said, I would love to buy here, but you can't be that crazy. And I kept going back to it and back to it. I thought, oh, what the hell? Let's go have a look. And I looked at it, and basically I was hooked. And I went along to a planner, and I said, I'm looking at this 180 square metre disused cocktail bar in Emily Place in Auckland. It's 6 minutes walk from Queen Street there. Do you reckon I can go to the council and get a resource consent to get this reclassified from commercial use, it was a failed bar, to residential? And this bloke looked at it and he said he only takes on jobs that he knows he's going to succeed at. And he said, yeah, I reckon we can get this reclassified. So I put my offer in, got it accepted. Nobody else was putting an offer in. It was too blooming crazy. And we went to the council 4 weeks later. Resource consent came through, and I converted basically then over the next 18 months, with no building consent required for work that I did there, this cocktail bar into a beautiful large apartment there I've got my spa in there, got my gym in there, got a bit of a home cinema thing going on, added a few extra bedrooms, and of course once it got reclassified, the value basically immediately doubled on the place. So that is my sort of thinking outside the box. I did something which other people just went, no, that's too crazy. I'd not do that. And I thought, well, I'm crazy. I mean, my first house I bought back in 1987, the FOMO that you have felt and you maybe feel at the moment, I felt that in spades in the middle of 1987. Prices were rising. Rumours of every economist at the Reserve Bank is buying houses. I had to buy anything. So I thought, I've got to find something that no one else is going to bid on. And so I found it. It's a half acre of basically blackberry bush with a house on it in a gully downstream of 2 reservoirs in Wellington. Why was it on the market and so cheap there at $82,000? Because the council had bought it about 6 or 7 years earlier. Why did they purchase it and a number of other properties of the 7 in this valley there? Because a report came out saying when the earthquake comes to Wellington, the upper concrete reservoir will burst, the water will flow onto the lower reservoir, made of dirt, it will burst, half the water will go through the Karori Tunnel, down Glenmore Street and take out civil defence, which at that time was underneath the parliamentary swimming pool as well. The other half will go down this valley and wipe out these houses. The recommendation in the report was build steps up the western slope of the valley. In the event of an earthquake, run up the steps. FOMO led me to buy this thing. It was absolutely fantastic. For 6 years, I'd show up proudly at work covered in blackberry scratches from, making a lawn, and I learnt some basic handyman skills, etc. on the whole place. I really didn't make any capital gain. Like I say, I bought 4 weeks before the share market crashed, so just keep that in mind. But I would do it again. I just absolutely loved it. And I said about the bar, it's sort of female. It's too pretty to be calling it a masculine bar at all. And if you're interested, Google Tony Alexander Listener, as in the Listener magazine. They did an article on me and my bar in the March issue of 2016. My time has got to be well up. Thanks very much for having us this evening. Cheers.